Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Max Weinberg of the E Street Band performs this Saturday and Sunday at Wolf Trap in Virginia. I spoke with him in 2019 about his drumming career from Bruce Springsteen to Conan O'Brien.
Oh, it's nice to join you today, Jason. Thanks very much.
You're calling it Max Weinberg's jukebox. So what all does that, entail set list-wise?
I've actually had young teenagers today who have been brought to my show. I see them maybe beforehand, and they'll ask me what a jukebox is. You don't really see too many anymore. A jukebox, of course, is where the audience puts in their requests for the songs. So what this is it's all 60s and 70s songs as requested by the audience right there in real time. It's music that I grew up with, that was the soundtrack of my life, and as it turned out has become the soundtrack of all of our lives. Everything from the Beatles to the Stones to Bruce to all the English invasion acts, the Beach Boys. You name it, we play it. It's a fun show. It's not a concert. It's a party. That's the idea. We have a revolving video list of about 300 songs, and people just yell them out. And sometimes a song will prompt a story from me that has either a personal memory, or I might draw a parallel between, for example, a song I played drums on, maybe on a Bruce record, that I lifted something from another record. So it's more than music. It's a little bit of, my history as well.
Are you doing vocals, or is someone else up there doing the vocals?
No, I'm not doing vocals. There's a famous story of me not singing in the E Street Band. When I auditioned for Bruce in 1974, the ad that I answered said wanted no junior Ginger Bakers, which was kind of a snipey way of saying he wanted an accompanist. But it also said drummer must sing. So, of course, when I went down to the audition, I said, naturally I sang. So, about 65 drum audition, I got in the E Street Band, and I was game. Vinny Lopez is a great singer, and he was the original drummer, and he sang. I was game. I would sing background vocals. About 2 days into my tenure with Bruce and the E Street Band, Bruce came over and said, Max, you can just drum. So that was the end of my singing career, and that was 45 years ago. So it kind of all worked out.
That's awesome. So that was 74. That's when you actually auditioned for Bruce. Take me back even before that. Growing up in New Jersey, at what age did you get your first drum kit, or, what bands were you listening to at the time that made you want to get into music? I want to know your roots of how you got behind the drum kit.
Well, my first drum hero was DJ Fontana, who was Elvis Presley, that is, his longtime drummer. Played with him from 1964, recorded with him until 68, and I saw Elvis on the Milton Berle show. It was a couple of months before the Ed Sullivan show in 1956, and they had one camera shot of Elvis and his three backing musicians. And I went right to the drums, that drum roll and Hound Dog. It just kind of grabbed me. And, people point to what was their first inspiration. That was my first inspiration. I'd already had rhythm, banging on things. And when I was about 7, which would have been about 1958, I could play a little bit of a march on a drum. I didn't have a drum, but my mother was a bit of a stage mother and went up to a band leader at probably a wedding that we were at, or a wedding or a bar mitzvah, and asked if I could sit in. So I did. I played When the Saints Come Marching In, a little bit of a march. And the guy got such a kick out of it, he started hiring me as a little novelty act for his club dates in northern New Jersey. And I worked off and on with him till I was about 14, and started playing in rock bands when I was maybe 11 or 12. And that just kind of went on from there. So by the time I met Bruce in the E Street Band at 74, I had done every kind of job you could think of, from cruise ships in the Caribbean to strip joints. I played in the circus. I played a lot of club dates. I was pretty versatile as a drummer, which was coincidentally what Bruce wanted for the E Street Band, someone who could play a little bit of everything.
How did you hear about that audition? Did you just see, were you already a fan of Bruce, and then when you saw it, you said, oh my God, I got to do it? Or, did you see it listed somewhere, or how did you find out about it?
Well, I wish I could say I was a fan. I had no idea who Bruce was at the time. I was in a band. At the time, I was going to college. It was 1974. I was going to Seton Hall University in New Jersey. I was playing in the Broadway show Godspell at night, and I was playing in whatever club bands I could play in, whether they were, sort of legitimate music or rock bands. And one of the bands I played with, two of the guys knew the recording engineer for Bruce up in Rockland County, New York, which is near Nyack, New York, and I didn't know Bruce and the E Street Band. It was called Bruce and the E Street Band at the time. I didn't know them, I hadn't heard them. And the one keyboard player, both of these keyboard players in the band that I was playing in, auditioned, didn't get the job, and about a month later they said, these guys are still looking for a drummer, Max, maybe you ought to call up. So I did. I called, this was a blind call, and I called their management, Bruce's management office at the time, and, made an appointment to go down and play, and that was 45 years ago. So I hadn't heard any of the records, but, the first impression I had was this was an individual who knew exactly what he was. I'd never experienced anything like that. And it was not only the way Bruce projected his personality and his music in the audition, it was the way that Clarence Clemens, Gary Talent, and Dan Federici, the three guys who were in the E Street Band who were at my audition, it was the way that they responded to Bruce. So that was pretty spectacular, and I must say it wasn't a terribly hard audition because Bruce was so definite about what he wanted, and that made it. I was used to taking direction, playing in all these sort of, what they used to call legitimate drumming, like playing for shows and dancers and singers and things like that. Bruce was a phenomenal band leader. I noticed that right away. I guess the biggest impression was that for the first time in my life, I had somebody setting up my drums. Which that made a big impression on me. For 16 years prior to that, I lugged my drums around and I set them up, which was fine by me. But it was such a shock to actually have somebody doing that. But you go through all the tours we did, and they were all fantastic. In those early days, I guess that first one maybe was kind of special because we were together 24/7. We were driving around in a van, and we graduated to a motorhome. But so we were really in close quarters for many, many, many months on end, and so it was a real bonding experience.
During that initial run, that couple-decade run there, did you have a favorite tour that you did?
To tell you the highlights, there were so many. I mean, certainly on the Born USA tour, it was both fun. It was extremely rewarding, all that hard work. Obviously, musically it always paid off, but that tour really kind of shot Bruce and the band into the stratosphere, and that was fun. Tunnel Love Tour was interesting. What stands out for me on that was the opportunity to play in East Berlin a year before the Berlin Wall came down and get a taste of for about 2 days, the bleakness of being actually in a communist country. And so that was very interesting. But, it's been really a pageantry of unbelievable experiences. Even the so-called, quote, breakup, which turned out to be an 11-year hiatus, so I guess you could call it a breakup. But in a way, it was this big interruption where all of us were forced. It was a good thing. All of us were forced to, fly on our own. And as disconcerting as that can be, it leads to a tremendous amount of growth. Had that not happened, I would have never ended up for 17 years on late-night television, which was a real phenomenal opportunity for me. And one of the best things about that experience was I was able to be a full-time dad to my 2 children. And I'm real excited to play. I'm always excited to play Washington for a number of reasons. I have a lot of great memories of playing all over Washington. But my daughter, Allie Rogan, is going to be there, and she's going to sing a couple songs. She's a wonderful singer. She's a journalist, but she's really, in our family, she and my son, Jay, they're the ones with the real musical talent.
Well, he's the drummer of Slipknot, right? Yeah. Jay's
the drummer of Slipknot, and Allie is a wonderful journalist who now is with PBS NewsHour. She was with ABC. She was with NBC working at the Obama White House. So the real fun thing for me was having a full-time job in New York, but being home every night.
Plus, that makes you, a household name on television sets all over the country in a way that maybe if someone doesn't come out to a Bruce show, you're reaching an even bigger audience. So that's kind of cool. Any memories of the Conan days? Because that you're talking about some of the sketch comedy jokes of my, like the soundtrack of my life, if you will, of all those late night skits. We still quote them. Max Weinberg 7 Max. It was always the signature we kicked the show off on. But how cool was it that eventually he started kind of weaving you guys in as sort of a comedic foil in some of the bits too?
That was wonderful. The late night television scene is radically different than it was when we were at NBC in New York at the late night program, and even the Tonight Show. It's very, very different now. And it was a wonderful opportunity to explore that, that side of me that, Bruce in his book refers to my sense of humor, but I guess it came out in some pretty crazy ways on TV. And I think one thing people don't realize is that a job like that is for everybody, particularly the writers, the comedy writers, is really hard. I mean, it's a grind, but what's great about it is you get to show off at night on TV. I had a wonderful band who worked for me, who were dedicated and fantastic entertainers and musicians. So it was a lot of fun. It's like any job, it's got ups and downs, but the interesting thing about it was different every day, different guests, different music to play. It was also a wonderful way for me to have these 6 great musicians at my disposal every day to practice stuff that I didn't know how to play that, half the time wouldn't even end up on TV. It was just a way for me to kind of workshop. It made me much, much more versatile than the years that I spent early on in the E Street Band.
How did you and Conan come up with that little, where you're hitting the cymbals, you're hitting the drums, and he's doing that little, it's almost like pull strings on his hands, and then he snips it, and his hair and his pompadour fluffs. How did you guys come up with that?
All right. So much of that stuff just happened spontaneously. And with that, the one thing I did not do, which all the other late-night drummers seem to do, which is why I didn't do it, was I didn't do rim shots, which became a funny bit where I was the reluctant drummer. And you had to specifically ask me to do a rim shot. And it became, over 4,000 shows, it became a comedic element. But when through my experience of working with dancers and musical comedy of Broadway type shows, and Bruce, where we started to play bigger and bigger arenas, it's really a James Brown thing. The drummer accents a physical movement, but it's a vaudeville thing. It goes back to the very beginnings of organized music in American musical comedy and light opera, where the percussion instruments accent some sort of physical, they call it business. And, if a dancer kicks, you hit a cymbal. And so when he did that, the first time he did it, I just kind of followed him doing it, and it would just add a little emphasis. And, also you're on at 12:30, so there is a component of the audience who might be dozing off. So the little bit of physical, accent that I could provide with the drums might shock somebody into waking up also.
It was such a great run, so many great bits in the late slot. When he bumped up to the Tonight Show, and NBC dropped the ball on that and got freaked out over ratings or whatnot, I thought you guys were plugging along fine. But how did you make the decision not to travel with him over to CBS? Was it just you were getting involved with E Street again and wanted to go back out on tour, or what was that decision like? Well,
the show ended in January of, 2010. And at that point, I had done it from, we debuted September of 93, but it started in May. So that was 17 years. There was a lot of E Street projects in the pipeline. And I was living in New Jersey, and, I had a house in Los Angeles. So it was a real natural kind of progression to almost like taking a fork in the road. Conan went one way, I went another. And the TBS program, which I popped in one night. I was in LA to see Slipknot, and my wife and I went over there, and it was kind of like, not that I'm comparing myself to Bob Hope, but it was like when Bob Hope would, drop in on Johnny Carson unexpectedly, and that was really fun. But it wasn't completely unexpected. I said I was going to be out there, and said it'd be great, if you could do a bit. So I did a bit, and that was great. In TV, you sort of, it really, you can see the progression of my hair from the first show we did to the last one I did, and it got progressively grayer because it's really a lot of work. It's much more work than the hour you might watch on TV. And in fact, it's become very different with the internet. You know, we started that show pre-internet, so it was linear, and now it's sort of, you know, you're looking for the one soundbite that you can use. So it's quite a different landscape in television, and bands have you know, the sort of typical setup of the host, the band leader, sidekick. To some degree, to a large degree, actually, that's fallen by the wayside. You know, we caught, as it turns out, the last years of the golden age of late-night television, that particular show. The high point of the Tonight Show for me, frankly, was seeing my name in the same sentence as Doc Severinsen. That was a mind-blower. You know, there's been like 5 or 6, I forget the number of band leaders on the Tonight Show, and to see my name in the same sentence as a list, you know, of Doc Severinsen and Skitch Henderson, for someone of my age, that was something, that was just off the charts.
Well, I'm glad that you guys, you know, got the band back together, as the phrase goes, and have been touring again with Bruce and the E Street Band, and, you know, get inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's got to be pretty rewarding there, sir, after all those years. What was that like to finally go in?
Well, I've had so many of my young, you know, rock and roll fantasies come true through the years. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was very nice. It was sweet. It was a bit bittersweet because Danny and Clarence weren't there, obviously, and you know, you can't talk about the E Street Band in no way, shape, or form without Clarence Clemens and Dan Federici. But you know, it was very nice, and you know, it was great having my family there. It's a star-studded affair, and my understanding is we went on too long, but I think we sucked up all the oxygen in the room. There were so many people on the stage. It was like an hour of speeches, but it was a fun night.
I've actually gotten to catch you guys, I think it was at Nat Park, and I'm just blown away that you've been at it for decades and you're still, you know, you're not showing any signs of slowing. You're still putting on those famous 4-hour shows.
Well, the length of the shows, obviously, and the song selection is not up to me or anybody else but Bruce. And if he wants to play 4 or 5 hours, I'm up for it. I have the physical stamina. I never stop playing. I mean, I've done 130 shows with my jukebox band, which largely is to keep drumming. Yeah, I don't sit home and just you know, look at my Hall of Fame trophy. You know, I've got to be out there working. I enjoy it, and I enjoy playing with the guys and entertaining an audience and giving them more than what they bargained for. But a lot, you know, with the long hour shows, I somehow seem to be built for that, and there's a certain momentum that builds up. I don't get tired for some reason. Right. I don't know exactly why that is. I think maybe physically I've adapted to it. And I don't stop playing. If you've seen our shows in the last 5 years, there's always these between-song drum solos for hours, and I've learned how to do that. So, you know, a lot of it has to do with experience and discipline and finesse and a rock and roll spirit, which is what's been inhabiting me since the time I saw Elvis with DJ Fontana. I wanted to do that.
Adrenaline, baby.
You know, I guess adrenaline is a small part of it, but the adrenaline, you know, just getting hyped up, that can actually detract from it. And I've talked to professional athletes about this. You've got to really control that hypey factor of the chemical reaction in your body. Adrenaline certainly helps, but willpower helps more. Otherwise, how do you explain, you know, the 1981 Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe tennis match that went on for like 8 or 9 hours? It's got to be more than adrenaline. It's know-how. It's willpower. It's the desire. It's the desire to push yourself further than you think you're able to push yourself. And you surprise yourself, actually, on a physical level. It's physical and it's mental. And the other thing I recommend is getting a lot of sleep. If you're going to play drums with Bruce Springsteen, get a lot of sleep.
You've toured and done these 4-hour shows forever, but if there's one song that you crave being on there because you just absolutely love it, and if it's not on the set list, you're bummed out.
Well, I take them one song at a time. I don't really even, you know, the set lists are actually, you probably heard, they're kind of irrelevant. He writes out a set list of 30 to 33 songs, and then right away he changed at least 15 or 16 of them, so you really have to pay attention. I love playing every song, you know. I love playing the songs that I didn't even record, you know, because they're all of a type. They're all Bruce Springsteen music. It's been said, and I've said it, that Ramrod is a particularly fun song to play because it's such a simplistic beat. but it's a particular groove. The beat is easy, the groove is not. And when I play it in a stadium, you can see people just physically moving that and to that beat. And that's really, it's usually a place in the show where I can kind of look around and I can see, the multitude of people, digging that song and that beat. But I try to give all my abilities to every single song, every single time. I take them. That way it never gets boring. I mean, I've played Rosalita 1,000 times, but every time I play it, it may be the first time you hear it. And it may be the first time you hear Bruce sing it. So he doesn't ever lay back. And in the 45 years I've known him and played with him, that is such a constant, is that he pushes and pushes and pushes to be better all the time. So when you're around someone like that, almost by osmosis, you do that as well. And you do it by leading rather than directing. And so I've learned a lot. It's been a life lesson, not just a phenomenal musical experience, playing with Bruce and the E Street Band. And, it really is about the stamina you build up. That's physical. I work out relentlessly and I'm in good shape and I watch what I eat. But it's also the willpower that, I've gotten it down to every beat. Every single beat I play matters. And whether it's with my own bands or with Bruce and the E Street Band, the audience deserves no less.
I hope we get a big audience for Max Weinberg's Jukebox. Max Weinberg, thanks so much. You've been great.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.